What's up, YouTubers? I had a little bit of time before work, so I thought rather than giving up and not shooting a video, that I would at least shoot a quick one that we could all learn something from. So, with that said, let's get into it. You're probably wondering what the hell I have in front of you here, and I'll simplify it. It is a weld with 6010 done at about 90 amps on 3/8 plate, which is something I've tested a lot before. And there's a little difference with this guy. And what I mean by that is I welded this like normal, and then I also welded around the corner. And by welded around the corner, I don't mean in one continuous motion, but basically I just kind of did a little 3/4 inch weld on both sides of it. And there are some weld defects. You know, you can blame the fact I didn't take my sweet time to prep this stuff right after I ran this pass, but whatever, that's not the point of this. The point of what I'm going to show you today is how important it can be to do what's called wrap your corners. Now, it's kind of an internet trope or meme that people always say, oh, that weld doesn't have the corner wrapped, and it's kind of like a joke, and I get in on it too because it's funny. But this test, we're going to see how much strength you're losing by just welding like on this and not going around a plate. Now, I've done a lot of brake tests on 6010 rods for 1/8 inch. They average somewhere around 90 to about 100 foot-pounds on my testing rig. So we should see a pretty significant increase in strength it takes to break this, despite all us doing is this little tiny weld on both sides. And I'll show you the other side as well. You can see, I mean, that one's a little bulbous, but whatever. So let's go chuck this in the vise and break it. All right, so I got it all set up here. And we're just going to do a simple brake test, like I had said. Now, these have averaged around, I don't know, mid-90s to at most maybe 100. So a little bit of weld can go a long way. So let's break this and see what it actually breaks at. $167.2. So let's go and look at this on the table. So when you look at what little bit of weld we had here, and let me zoom in, just this little bit here and here increases strength by like over 60% of this in a test that we did. So immense amount of strength increase for the smallest little bit of weld, and that has to do with the mechanical strength of this joint. Without that side welded, this can pry and use the weld as a lever, and simply by tacking the corners down the edges, it can't pry using the weld. It has to tear through both this side and this side of the weld before it can even move. And that's why we saw such a huge strength increase. Now, had I even put a literal like 1/4 inch tack weld on the back here, I don't even know that we would have been able to break it with my test setup. It would have exceeded the torque gauge readings capability. And that's just off a little bit of a weld, which is why it's so important if you have access to the back of something to run a little bit of a weld on it or a tack or something, or wrap the corner as well, because you're giving up a ton of strength if you don't do that. Now, obviously, this is just a single pass, and plates this thick should really have probably 3 passes with 1/8 inch rod because of the thickness of the base material. So that would increase the strength as well. But honestly, I don't know that a 3-pass weld would be able to exceed the strength of just tacking these corners down a little bit. So interesting stuff. Let's go to conclusion. Well, what did we learn today? Well, I learned the importance of welding around a corner, and doing a little bit extra will make a huge difference when it comes to strength, especially in this type of a test. And this test is very relevant to real world stuff. Like anything you might weld, it could be something on a, I don't know, on a tractor, on a tow truck, on your car. By leaving stuff unwelded, you're increasing the mechanical advantage, or basically you're making it easier to break a weld by not restricting the part's ability to move, if that makes sense. Hopefully that does. And this isn't an end-all be-all. Like, there's certain circumstances you may not want to do this. Like, you may be constrained where you can't get a weld into that area due to clearance. Maybe a plan for something you're building says don't do it. I mean, hey, if you have blueprints you're working on and they say, you know, this is what you have to do, then do it. I mean, if generally speaking, though, it's in your best interest to do this. Now, if both sides of this plate had a complete weld on it, then yeah, welding the end really wouldn't be necessary, to be honest, because you're never going to pull this plate like this off. And if both sides are welded, it can't really move much either way. So very realistically, I would say that that would be a case that you wouldn't necessarily need to. And it's always in your best interest, if you have access to the back of a fillet weld, like say it's something on your trailer, your truck, whatever, it doesn't hurt to put at least a couple, you know, half-inch weld or fully welded. I mean, it will be stronger. With that said, you can actually downsize how big of a weld you deposit if both sides are welded. So like in this case, 3/8 plate, I would really need 2 more passes on this to get to full strength. If I welded both sides, I would probably only need a single pass on both to hit max strength. And that's a rough estimate on that. But anyways, hopefully you learned something in this video. If you have any comments or questions, you know where to leave them. Thanks for sticking around.